Good morning. I call the Subcommittee on Housing, Transportation, and Community Development to order. Today, we are going to take a look at Community Development Financial Institutions, or CDFIs. Our hearing will explore how the federal government can help support their innovative work and how we can work together to address some of the challenges faced by underserved communities when it comes to accessing capital and the financial system. The COVID-19 pandemic has not been the great equalizer. It has laid bare the disparities in our society that existed before the pandemic. And too often it is Black and Brown and Indigenous families who have faced the most significant burdens. But the economic disparities didn't start, as I said, during the pandemic. According to the Federal Reserve, as of 2019, a typical Black family's net worth was just 15% of a typical white family's worth. A typical Hispanic family's net worth was about 19% of a white family's. And the typical net worth for Native American families is also just a fraction of the typical white families. While there are many causes for this great inequity, one factor is a lack of access to capital and to financial services for people of color, Indigenous communities, and in small towns and rural places. When the CDFI fund, the federal agency that oversees CDFI programs, when it was established in 1994, there were about 80 CDFIs. Today, there are more than 1,000, many with innovative models that weren't even imagined when the CDFI fund was first established. And they've played a critical role in bringing capital and financial services to a wide variety of underserved communities, from urban areas to small towns and rural places to tribal lands. For instance, in Minnesota, the African Development Center helped fund 2 malls that have more than 450 African small businesses and over 500 jobs. The Indian Land Company, the ILCC, Indian Land Capital Company, made a loan of nearly $1 million to the Lower Sioux to allow them to expand their land by about 10%. I appreciated the opportunity to visit with them last summer and learn more about this project. And in 2018, I visited University Enterprise Labs, which was funded in part by Sunrise Banks, which is a certified CDFI, with support from the New Markets Tax Credit Program. Those funds have helped expand a cutting-edge life sciences incubator in an area that is currently shared by industrial uses and students on the border of St. Paul and Minneapolis. With their successful track record of reaching underserved communities, Congress has looked to CDFIs as effective community development organizations to implement programs. So here's just a few examples. In 2000, Congress enacted the New Markets Tax Credit, which provides tax incentives to allow CDFIs to work on economic development projects in economically distressed areas. That program has proven successful, and I'm glad to be a supporter of bipartisan legislation from Senator Cardin and Senator Blunt to update and expand that tax credit. During the Great Recession, Senator Menendez authored legislation to establish the CDFI Bond Guarantee Program. The Bond Guarantee Program provides stable, long-term sources of capital for CDFIs without any subsidy from taxpayers. Earlier this week, Senator Rounds and I introduced legislation to make that program permanent and to adjust some of its loan requirements to make it more accessible to smaller CDFIs who might want to participate. I'm looking forward to hearing from our witnesses today about how our legislation could make a difference for community development. In 2020, Congress set aside $25 billion of PPP lending for CDFIs to distribute because CDFIs have relationships with many communities that banks and credit unions just weren't able to reach. CDFIs made more than 100,000 PPP loans in the first months of that program, and that effort was critical to helping thousands of small businesses stay afloat. In addition, in the bipartisan year-end funding package that we enacted at the end of 2020, Congress made an historic investment in CDFIs and minority depository institutions, providing rapid relief grants. As a result of that program, 27 Minnesota CDFIs received grants totaling $38 million, funds that will be invested in our state to support new lending and services. Senator Warner played an important role in getting this investment enacted, and I know that many of us supported the work that he's done. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today about how that funding is making a difference in their communities. So before I turn to Senator Rounds, I'd like to thank Mike for being such a good partner in planning and organizing this hearing. As you were saying at the beginning, this is a hearing where we tend to focus on what we can find agreement on where we can find common ground, and approach this from a perspective of solutions, and that's very important. I know that we have a shared interest in building strong communities in our states and around the country, and especially in supporting economic development and access to capital in the indigenous communities that both of our states share. As I mentioned before, yesterday we joined together to introduce together legislation to update the CDFI bond guarantee program to make it more available for smaller CDFIs. And we have also done legislation together to support access to mortgages for Native Americans in a partnership between CDFIs and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So I'm hopeful that today's hearing will help us identify additional areas where we can work together and pave a path to advancing these important pieces of legislation and others that we'll hear about today. So Senator Rounds, thank you so much for your partnership, and you are now ready.